Oh, we're live streaming, it says.
Here we go.
Hey, finally.
Oh, can we see us?
Not yet.
I'm looking. Hopefully there'll be someone there. If you are there and you can see us, shout, put a comment in, do a thumbs up or a heart, and then we know we're not all on our own. Give us some likes. Tell us give us your names, and then we'll know who you are as well, so we're not just talking to ourselves. So we're going to talk about low libido today, which I know is kind of up there as one of the top issues that women in their 40s going through perimenopause and menopause face. And it's something that generally doesn't get talked about a huge amount. It's one of those kind of taboo subjects that we just pretend, let's not talk about that because women aren't meant to be kind of sexual beings, and so we'll just kind of put that under the carpet, but it's a big deal. And I've certainly worked with clients where it actually makes a huge difference to their relationships. It makes them not necessarily feel like a real woman, as well as creating conflict. So it's something that we need to talk about. Now, the first thing we need to be really clear is whether it is actually a low libido problem, as in there are problems with the hormones and that's why you have a low libido, or whether it's other things. So it could just be pure fatigue. So I know for me, a couple of years ago, I was working 15, 16 hours a day, highly stressed, still got kids, and I would go to bed and the last thing I'd want to do is have sex. I was so exhausted. So that's not low libido. That's kind of having to look at what's going on in your life and do things need to change in your life so that you actually have the energy to be able to have some fun. You've also got to take into account, well, is your diet good enough that you've got that energy in the first place? So if you haven't got a diet that's rich in nutrients, you're going to be missing out on some of the nutrients like zinc and the B vitamins that specifically help to make energy in your body. So if you've got a poor diet and you haven't got those building blocks for energy, then low libido is going to be part of that because you're going to be too knackered to even think about that. The other thing is whether you even find that person attractive. So again, you've got to think, is it low libido or is it just, I don't fancy the person opposite me anymore? And that's obviously something that needs working on. And it might be that you need to see a relationship counsellor or coach as well to deal with that and to kind of put spark back into your relationship. It might be also your own issues around sex and your own body and your own, so you're kind of, you don't want to go there because actually you've got issues with your own body image and your own feelings about yourself, which again might come across as being low libido, but it's actually about your own mindset. So again, you might need to then see a coach to deal with that. So the reason I'm saying that is that there are lots of things that you have to take into account before you say it's actually low libido. Now, low libido itself is really mediated by our sex hormones in our brain. So in our ovaries, we make estrogen, we make progesterone, we make testosterone, but we also make those hormones in our brain. And the sex drive comes from our brain. So if we have low estrogen, if we have low progesterone and we have low testosterone, that's actually going to affect our sex drive. So estrogen in small amounts, and again, everything's about the kind of the balance. Small amounts of estrogen actually prime our brain cells and also prime progesterone to turn on our sex drive. If we have too much estrogen, it won't do the job because it's just too much. If we have really low estrogen, it won't be enough to turn on that trigger. The same thing, that estrogen will prime progesterone to turn on our sex drive. So if we don't have enough progesterone being produced, and that can usually be because of nutrients, if it's in our brain, it's got nothing to do with our reproductive system, then again, it might be that sex drive doesn't get turned on. They did some studies on rats as well, and too much progesterone, which can happen, it's pretty rare, but it can happen, too much progesterone in the rats actually switched off the sex drive in men and women. So again, it's that range is really important. Testosterone is also really important for our sex drive too. It's a thing that gives us the motivation, and as I said, produced in the ovaries and also the brain. And that's really important that you've got enough. If you've got low testosterone, that will mean that you will possibly have low libido. It's one of the key low testosterone kind of symptoms. The other thing about estrogen is it also makes our bits down below really sensitive. So if we have really low estrogen, we're not going to be that sensitive down below. And when we ovulate, we have really high amounts of estrogen as well. And that's one of the reasons why perhaps around ovulation we get a bit more fruity, because our body wants us to make babies. So again, you kind of got to take into account, are you getting those feelings? Even if it's just once in a whole cycle, that's a sign that at least you've got enough estrogen. But if you don't feel fruity at all, it might be because you have low estrogen too, and not ovulating can sometimes affect that. But there are definitely things that we can do about it. So it's not an age thing, it's a hormonal thing, and we can rectify that. So you kind of got to look at your nutrients, but you've also got to look at how we can balance our libido. So for me personally, it's been more about tiredness and fatigue, and that becomes another thing that I've had to give. And I suppose I've resented that because I particularly in the jobs that I've had previously, now I'm giving. And when I go to bed at night, all I wanted to do was just read a book and be in my bubble and just everyone else go away. And so having sex was the last thing I'd want to do, because it was just more giving, which is kind of warped, because it shouldn't just be about giving, it should be also about receiving. So there's a little bit of mindset there where I have to kind of think it's not just about the giving, it's about the receiving, but also looking at how I arrange my day so that I'm not so tired at night. But I know for Andrea, when we looked at the Eve test, the low testosterone played a big role for you.
Well, yeah, it's a matter of figuring out if that is why, you know, like you said, it's a matter of figuring out if is that the reason, or is it other reasons, you know, like, yeah, that's definitely it. That you don't know, like, it's just, yeah, it's just no drive, I guess, and just lazy.
Yeah,
pure laziness, you know, like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, I when I go to bed, I want to go to bed. You know, but it does, it is a problem, it does cause trouble in relationships, for sure. And I thought you made a really good point about maybe if it isn't a hormonal thing, then going to talk to someone like a therapist or something like that about it together, because there's you know, I openly admit I just haven't been proactive about trying harder, I guess, you know, which is frustrating for your partner. And but there's I think going to, if it's not like a hormonal issue that you can't fix and it's something else, I think going to see a therapist or reading some books or doing something about it in order to kind of like help your relationship, maybe you can come to some kind of like happy balance. And it also is really good for the men as well to kind of hear that from somewhere else, because their idea of expressing how much it frustrates them, or their idea of foreplay or whatever it may be, is very different to ours.
Yeah.
So, you know, a hand on the boob is not foreplay. You know, like, that's not foreplay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, surely these men should know that by now. But
sometimes you're too tired and you don't want it to be more than that. So let's be honest. It's like, that'll do.
Yeah.
The clock is ticking.
Oh God, see, that's no fun. Yeah. But and also learning of ways that both partners can express how they're feeling to each other, because I know for me personally, the way that it gets expressed to me, the way that the frustrations get expressed to me, totally sends us down the complete wrong path.
Yeah,
you know, like, totally is like, well, did you need to say it like that, or why couldn't you just talk to me about it, you know, in a different way, or why can't we just like have a discussion rather than making some sarcastic remark and continuing on being, you know, like, there's different ways of dealing with it as well. So I think that it's probably a bit of both, you know, like, I think maybe if your hormones are really like rock bottom and everything is just completely, you know, really low or flat, or the hormones are showing a huge problem, then fix those for sure. But then you also need to fix the other side of it as well.
I think it's one of those conversations. It's not an easy conversation to have, but you've got to sit down and have a really frank conversation and explain to your partner that for some men, that's how they feel loved. If that's not coming, then they don't feel loved. So it's about explaining to them what's going on and trying to find ways of showing them that you do love them, even if there's a problem with this. I mean, to some extent, there's the fake it till you make it. You actually make testosterone by having sex. So to some extent, you have to find a way of booking the time in, or kind of having a date night, or trying to, instead of it being spontaneous when you're tired, actually doing. I mean, I can think there are a lot of men who can't wait for the lockdown to be over, because hopefully the kids won't be at home and then there's a bit more opportunity to have some fun. But you kind of got to book that time in and then make a big deal of it and say, you know, this is an hour where you're going to have some fun. And maybe that's what you do. Even if you don't feel like it, you might find that by doing that, you do kind of feel a bit more fruity, and it becomes a bit more of a kind. I know it's routine, it's not very spontaneous, but sometimes when you get so busy, you can't be spontaneous anymore, and so you kind of have to book it in. And so I definitely think you need to have a look at your own feelings about sex and also your partner, and have frank conversations, or get support, and maybe do some, you know, a bit more outrageous things as well, so it's not boring and it doesn't become a chore.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what it becomes like, a chore.
Yeah. And then that you resent doing it, so you've got to kind of look at how can you make it not a chore.
Yeah. I know someone else who is in a very, very long-term, loving, beautiful relationship, but they I don't know when they probably last. It's probably been years and years. They're not intimate anymore. But she expressed that could be something to do with what you were talking about before with the hormones, but she expressed that she actually feels like she's being raped when they have sex. So that could be like the sensitivity that you were talking about before. Yeah. So
and that might also be some other stuff that she needs to talk through with a coach or a counsellor, just to find out where that's coming from. There's some reason why she feels like that, whether it's because she feels she's not in control of the situation, and to talk through how she can get through that.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much that, because as I said, he's amazing, but he's a wonderful guy. He's amazing, but I think it's more the feeling like it hurts, like that. Yeah. From what she has said. Right. Yeah.
And that's something else that can happen, is that because you have low estrogen, you basically get, you know, dried up vaginas. You don't have the mucus there anymore. The lining of the vagina can actually start to kind of wither away, and then that can create painful sex. So that's something else that definitely you can sort out.
Yeah.
So we've got any questions or comments?
Quite a few people on here. So Jane, communication is key. Communication is key between you and your partner, but it is such a sensitive subject to have. So you avoid it even more, which makes it even harder. Yeah.
That's true. It's true.
Yeah, I totally get that, because I'm not normally the one that would bring it up, but when it does get brought up, it's brought up in a way that pushes me further away.
Yeah. It ends up becoming an argument instead of an actual discussion. Exactly. Because you're passionate about it.
Yeah. So she's dead right. We need to make ways of communicating it in a calm manner when it's not in the bedroom, and you know, somewhere else. Like sit down and have a talk about it, and maybe come to some kind of solution. Or if you don't want to go and see someone or talk to someone, have find something, some don't know, there must be stuff on
There's heaps of stuff on there. I think it's really important when you have those communications as well that you talk about. I mean, I know it sounds cliche, but the whole I thing. So you talk about how you're feeling personally, rather than saying how you want, you know, blaming the other person.
Yeah.
You have to kind of talk about how it is for you, because then that way, because what can happen, particularly with guys, is that they get really defensive and they feel that you're kind of knocking them, and then as soon as they feel defensive, the whole conversation just turns.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that becomes really important.
But
the communication and how you communicate.
Would you say that if it is a real, like a really big issue for women, that they first and foremost would maybe get their hormones checked? Or
I think, number one, I would say there are a couple of things that I would get checked. One would be your reproductive hormones, because you want to have a look at your estrogen, progesterone and testosterone, because if they are really low, that will give you an idea as to what you could do next. The other thing that's worth checking is maybe down the line checking cortisol, and just making sure that your cortisol is not low, because that's or too high, because if it's too high, that again will have an impact on your hormones. If it's too low, then that's going to create that chronic fatigue. So you kind of just ruling out those things. Getting blood tests done as well, particularly B9, B12 and iron. A lot of women are low in iron because we bleed and we don't necessarily eat enough either your green leafy veggies, your vitamin C type foods, or even your meat in order to get enough iron from your diet. So both B9, B12 you get from animal products. B9 generally comes from green leafy veggies, your folate, other things as well. But if you check those three things, if they are low, they will cause anemia and fatigue. So you're kind of ruling those things out. You also want to check to make sure your thyroid's working. So a GP will do something called TSH, which is your thyroid stimulating hormone. And if that is underactive, you will be incredibly tired, and that will also cause low libido. So the thing you need to do is rule out, is it to do with something to do with your nutrition, or like anemia, or is it your thyroid or cortisol? Is it something that we can deal with, that it's like, that can be sorted out? Yeah. And then if it's not, then we need to look at like some of the mindset as well, and can we sort the mind out? What's really going on? What are your thoughts about yourself and your body? What are your thoughts about your partner? What are your thoughts about sex? And how can we make it not a chore? How can we make it fun, so that it's something you look forward to, rather than just something that you kind of look at the watch and think, oh God, not again. So there's definitely part of that too. Low fat diets are a real problem with women, because if you don't have enough fat in your diet, cholesterol in particular, we make cholesterol, but we also get it from diet. But women, when they're on low fat diets, can automatically have reproductive problems, because they're not eating the building blocks for their hormones. So we have to be really careful about, you don't want too much fat, don't want too much saturated fat, because that's clearly not good for us. But you also don't want to be on a really low fat diet, because then that can have a knock-on effect, and that can then create those low hormones that we don't want. And also, as I said, stress is massive. Got to deal with stress. Exercise is really important, because exercise helps to build testosterone and the growth hormone as well. So exercise is key. Reducing stress, liver support as well, to make sure that we are actually getting rid of any excess estrogen, because if there's too much of that, then that will also affect our libido. So there's just making sure you're looking after your liver, making sure you deal with stress, getting your exercise, looking at the mindset, and just checking that you've got a diet that's got all of the nutrients you need. They're the kind of the main basic things. There are herbs you can have. So some of the herbs that get used a lot to help with low libido are things like St. John's wort. And you have to be really careful with that, because that kind of clashes with everything. And if you're on the oral contraceptive pill, that clashes with St. John's wort, and so you've got a chance of being pregnant. So that's not awesome when you're in your 40s. So be careful. And I'd say talk to me or talk to another naturopath or herbalist before you take St. John's wort, to make sure if it's suitable for you. There's also something called Damiana, which was traditionally used by women in Central America, and also shatavari, which is a really cool herb, and tribulus. And so there's a couple of herbs specifically that can help kind of get your oomph back. really interesting study done on middle-aged women in their 40s, perimenopausal women, where they use tribulus as well. Now, tribulus has traditionally been used for men to increase testosterone and libido in men, but they also gave it to these perimenopausal women and found that it increased their sex drive. So that's something that's worth having. What I'd be really careful about is having just one herb to hopefully raise one hormone, because then that can have a knock-on effect on all the others. So it's really important that you're really careful about what you take so that it doesn't kind of create another problem.
Yeah, definitely. Don't just go and just do your own thing, right?
Yeah, be careful, because you can actually do more harm. I mean, the other thing is if a woman has a dry, sore vagina, and that's why she's struggling, so she might have the libido, but it's just so painful, she doesn't want to go there, then it's the last resort would be actually looking at hormone replacement. And you can get vaginal estrogen cream, and you can also get, and so you could certainly look at that. If nothing else works, you can use vitamin E cream or vitamin E, like the capsule, break that up and use it as a lubricant. But it might be that you need to look at hormone replacement estrogen cream, and you need to put it in the kind of the closer to the edge rather than sticking it right in, because the receptors are kind of lower down. So just be careful about where you put it. But that, I would say, is a last resort, and might be the thing that actually sorts it out. So I wouldn't say no to that.
Yeah, she's had chemotherapy.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's anything.
That certainly can make a difference, because that kills off healthy cells, and so that possibly would have a knock-on effect with her hormones.
Yeah.
And so it would be worth her checking that out.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't actually think she wants to.
We'll keep that between us then. And the 500 other people.
Oh, okay. Tanya's watching. She just said, sorry, I set my alarm, but forgot what it was for. That's okay, Tanya. You can watch.
That's the low estrogen in the brain. That's affecting your memory. It's all good.
She can. You can watch it later. You can watch the replay, or
awesome. And you can also, if anyone watches the replays, you can also post questions or comments afterwards, because we'll check and we can still reply to you. So it's all good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Tanya just said antidepressants have a huge effect on libido. Absolutely. That's a really good point. There are lots of medications that can actually affect libido. Yeah. And in fact, some antidepressants can make you more depressed as well. So alcohol can be, that can also be a depressant. That can actually affect libido. So we kind of think of it as a stimulant, but it can actually do the opposite. So, so yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right. That's, I hope we helped. I hope this helps. It's good to have a, conversation about it.
Let us know if you find it helpful, or if there's something that we've missed and that you wish that we'd mentioned as well, because now or later, because we'll definitely answer any questions.
Yeah, definitely. Cool.
Awesome.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we'll let you know what we're going to be talking about next week.
Yeah. And if any of you have any ideas, if you've got something that you think, actually, I'd really like to talk about that, please tell us. We really want you to know.
Yeah.
Is there a balance? Tanya's just said, is there a balance when taking medication? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that, but it's a really hard one when you're taking medication. There's a reason why you're on that medication, and the best thing you can do is have a chat with your GP and tell them about the side. The problem is that most medications have some kind of side effect, so it's a compromise. It's either, like I say with antidepressants, do you suffer depression, or do you take a medicine that might help you with your depression but could possibly give you low libido, or give you migraines, or create another problem? And what generally happens is that the doctor will give you another medication that helps with that side effect, and then before you know it, you're on 500 medications. So it's hard. So the only thing I would say is it's the risk and benefit. If you weren't on those antidepressants, what state would you be in? Yes, there are some fantastic herbs, And there's certainly like there's food and supplements. There's so much in regards to what diet can do for mental health. But that takes a while to kick in. I mean, the best thing with antidepressants is you're not meant to be on them for like decades. You're only meant to be on them for a short period of time whilst you kind of get your body back to the way it should be. But that has to be done with a conversation with the GP. So it needs to, you might be looking at improving your diet and looking at other things. There are certain herbs you could take as you were coming off your antidepressants. You could kind of then start taking herbs to balance them out. And there's some really great research on St. John's wort and saffron, rhodiola to some extent, but certainly saffron and St. John's wort, there's heaps of research in regards to depression, but it's got to be done in a really careful way, and it has to be done with you talking to your GP about, do I still need to be on antidepressants? If it's causing me low libido and that's actually a bigger problem, what can I do about it? And that's a conversation you really need to be having with the GP. And if you're seeing a naturopath or a nutritionist or a herbalist, then have it with them too. But you should never just come off. I mean, you never come off the medication without actually doing it properly and in conversation with the GP. So the balance is really the risks and the benefits. If you came off the antidepressants, what would the risks to your mental health be? And is it worth it if you then get your libido back? So you kind of got to balance the two, and every single person is completely different as to what it's like for them, because for some people without the antidepressants, then they might not be here, and then that becomes far more important than libido.
Yeah,
but totally. Hopefully that answered your question, Tanya.
Have you heard
sitting on the fence?
Have you heard the studies? I'm not sure how true it is, but have you heard of the study between the group of people on antidepressants and a group of people who just did exercise, and it did the same thing? Yeah. There are so
many studies out there. I think there are a lot of studies that show that antidepressants aren't always that effective, and can be just as effective as placebo. It depends on the medication, it depends on the individual, but certainly, exercise is massive because you're producing those endorphins that make you feel good, that give you a high. You're producing dopamine, you're producing all of these things that your body needs in order to feel good. So that's huge. I mean, the serotonin's made in the gut. However, serotonin in the gut is more to do with how your bowels work, but there's a huge link between our gut and our brain. So if you've got an inflammatory gut, if you're not eating the right foods, that's going to affect your mental health. So there's lots and lots of things that you could do for depression to prevent it and to get rid of it, because there's lots of reasons why people get depression as well. So it's about finding out what's the reason for the depression, in order to work out what we can do to kind of help combat it. And I would say antidepressants should be a last resort, and they were only ever designed for short term. And the problem is, a lot of people, it becomes their crutch. They're scared that if they come off of it, they're going to get depressed again. And I've suffered depression. I know how horrible it is. But they end up being on it for 20, 30 years, which is not what they were designed to be. They were only meant to be a short-term kind of stopgap while you sort out why you're depressed in the first place. So you do need to kind of take that into account. But yeah, I would say the research on antidepressants is no better than the research on, say, St. John's wort, which can sometimes be better than the medication. So there's definitely alternatives out there. And there's a lady called Dr. Julia Rutledge, who's I think she's Christchurch uni, and she's got a whole department, and her research is all about mental health and diet. And she's doing some really cool research on that. Ben Warren, who we do the e-test with, he's doing a PhD looking at like nutrition and anxiety. And so there's a lot of research out there, and it's kind of growing and growing and growing, because people are realizing actually how we live our lives and how we eat and how we move actually have a huge effect on our mind and our mental health. And so antidepressants aren't the be all and end all, but for some people that's the only thing that worked. So you can't knock that either.
Yeah. And there's a question there from there's a couple of questions. One from Jackie and another one from Tanya. Can you see them?
can't see. I've only got Jackie saying Kiora. I can't see a question.
Okay, so there's another one. There's one. Well, we'll just carry on from because we're already on the subject with Tanya, but she just said, can we have a discussion about mental health at some stage?
Absolutely. Do you want to, we could do that next week. We can talk about anxiety and depression if you want.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll do that next week. And Jackie just said bleeding during intercourse, even with lubricant.
Okay, so that is possibly part of that, like what we call vaginal atrophy. So as I said, when estrogen gets low, the lining of the vagina can sometimes kind of start to kind of wither away. So atrophy kind of means it's almost like starting to disintegrate. That sounds horrible. And that can possibly cause like inflammation and bleeding. It's definitely, what I'll probably do is go to a GP and get that checked, because you want to just check that it's that and nothing else. But a lot of the time, if you bleed when you have sex, it can be because the vaginal wall is kind of weak, and because of that low estrogen, and then it's starting to get inflamed and it can bleed. So, but it's definitely worth checking that out anyway.
Good.
And it might be that you do need that, possibly need the cream to kind of help with that as well, if it becomes a real problem. Do
you get that cream from the doctor?
GP. You'd have to speak to a GP and find out if it's suitable for you.
Okay.
And it's better than the oral hormone replacement therapy I'd be really nervous about, but certainly the vaginal cream, I would say, is generally got pretty good safety record.
Okay.
Anything
Cool.
else?
No. That looks like it. Yeah, that looks like us.
Awesome. Okay, so next week then we'll talk about anxiety and depression, and then Andrea, you're going to talk about pelvic floor.
Oh.
You're going to I'll tell you, I could tell you some stories about my pelvic floor. You might not want to know.
yeah. Why not? Let's talk. Yeah, let's have.
That was
let's talk about
when
it
I had kids.
Let's just discuss it all.
Let's do both ends.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. The 16-year-old son will be learning lots now.
Things he didn't even know he needed to learn.
Yeah. No,
well, my husband and son took the dogs for a walk when we started this, and they've just come in, and I bet they're thinking, have you finished talking about your women's stuff now? Is it safe?
Yeah. No, it's all right. It's all good. I sent mine out for to walk the dog as well. So.
Yes. Thank God for dogs.
You need to go now.
We're going to be talking about cervical mucus. Bye.
Oh dear, funny. All right, cool. All right, Tanya, love it. Thanks, guys. No problem,
awesome.
Tanya.
Okay, have an awesome week. The rest of you enjoy being at home with your kids, schooling and work and stuff. Don't eat too much chocolate or drink too much wine.
Chocolate's all gone. All right, have a lovely day.
All right, take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.